Space weather on Earth's day side quiets down a bit this week, while activity on the sun's backside grows. Those stories and more in the news this week. This forecast sponsored in part by Eric Johansson. Check him out at instagram.com/scubist. After that big solar storm that we had last week, things have definitely quieted down. When we look at the sun, there really aren't any big things coming our way. We do have a small coronal hole that's going to be kind of grazing the Earth strike zone here in the next week or so, but it may not bring us all that much fast wind. Outside of that, there are a few other small pockets of fast solar wind, but more like disturbed solar wind that could bring aurora to high latitudes, but not a lot else going on. So don't expect much out of this. On top of that, if you look at the sun, it is also completely spotless, so amateur radio operators and emergency responders, we're still dealing with really low solar flux, and I hate to say it, it looks like it's going to continue that way easily over this week. Switching to your M-Flare threat meter, as you can see, the X-ray flux continues to be extremely low, and therefore by proxy the solar flux is low. We do have a spotless sun, folks, still, and so we have solar flux that is sitting down into the mid to high 60s. This means we have no issues for radio blackouts, and I know even though the X-ray flux here does show a little bit of intermittent glitches here and there, some of that is due to a few bright regions that we've had kind of merging on the sun's surface and then disappearing almost as fast as they show up. But most of it's due to the eclipse season. This is when the satellite actually goes either behind the Earth shadow or behind the moon shadow for a short while. So we're getting these periodic data dropouts, but don't be fooled. It's not really anything that the sun is doing. Meanwhile, this is what's going to be pretty much the story for amateur radio operators and emergency responders. We're going to continue to sit into the mid to the high 60s easily over the next week. Switching to our solar storm conditions, you can see we were pretty quiet at the end of August, and then whammo! On August 31st, we got hit by that solar storm that bumped us up to active conditions. It bumped us up to storm conditions, and then G2 level storm conditions, and that brought aurora down from high latitudes into mid latitudes. We even saw aurora as far south as Colorado, but it was seen over many parts of the world. And this G2 level kind of bumped periodically off and on for several days. As a matter of fact, we stayed sporadically at storm levels over 3 days before things finally began to calm down on September 3rd. Then things kind of went to unsettled conditions and then bumped back up to active conditions easily over the next week, kind of up and down. Finally, by about the 9th, things finally began to settle down, and it's gotten quieter and quieter, and now we're finally back to quiet conditions, a little bit of unsettled, but not all that much, and these types of conditions here will continue easily over the next week. And during that huge solar storm that we had at the beginning of September, it was right in the middle of Hurricane Dorian, but there was some gorgeous aurora that was seen over many parts of the world. And I can't thank you Aurora field reporters enough for sending in so many beautiful photos online. I can't possibly show them all. I'll probably show some next week as well. But here are some gorgeous shots like this one in Sweden. And it was seen in Norway. We saw it in Finland and multiple places in Scotland. It was seen in the UK and in the Netherlands. And as we move over the pond, it was seen in Iceland in several places. And as we go to the Western Hemisphere, it was seen in the Yukon and in Cambridge Bay. It was seen in many places in Ontario. It was also seen in Manitoba. We saw it in Saskatchewan and in multiple places in Alberta. And it even dipped down into the United States. It was seen in Maine and in North Dakota, in Montana and Michigan, and also Washington State. And as we dive down under, it was seen in multiple places in New Zealand. So what else does our sun have in store for us this week? Well, this is stereo A. It's our partially backsided monitor. You can see here's Earth, here's the sun, and here's stereo A staring at the sun pretty much from the side. And when you look at the disk from stereo's view, well, there's not a lot going on. We do have a southern polar coronal hole that is going to be rotating into Earth view in the next couple days. It could bring us maybe some small disturbance with some fast wind in about 10 days or so, but it's not going to be all that big a deal. We do also have a couple bright regions on stereo's view. One of them looked like they kind of fired off some type of solar storm or just some type of flare and then died pretty quickly. It dove back under the surface. The other one looks like it's kind of hovering above a small coronal hole, and we're going to be watching this one along with that mini coronal hole, because as that rotates back into Earth view, that could give us a bigger chance for at least a small solar storm here in the next 2 weeks. Switching to our moon, we are now passing through the full moon phase, with a full moon being on the 15th. So you night sky watchers, you're going to have to compete with this bright companion, so be sure to check your local rise and set times. Switching to your solar storm conditions and aurora possibilities over the coming week, as I said before, this is a very quiet week in space weather. At high latitudes, NOAA is expecting only unsettled conditions with up to about a 15% chance of a minor storm, and this is going to be very sporadic at best. So aurora photographers at high latitudes, unless you're really at high latitudes, don't expect anything other than, let's say, quiet green arcs. Now, mid-latitudes, the story is even worse. We're expecting normal conditions to maybe unsettled conditions, but only about a 5% chance of active conditions. So you mid-latitude aurora photographers, you're definitely going to have to be taking a look at your old aurora photos that you got from the G2 level storm we had just last week. So enjoy those and take a nice rest, because you've definitely earned it. Switching to your solar flare and particle radiation storm outlook over the coming week, everything is still in the green when it comes to big solar flares. We have no risk for radio blackouts right now because we have a spotless sun, and this should make you GPS users very happy. We have no issues on Earth's day side, and as a matter of fact, no issues on Earth's night side either. So you should enjoy some decent GPS reception pretty much all around the globe. Unfortunately, you amateur radio operators and emergency responders, the solar flux is still in the high 60s or even mid to high 60s. This means poor radio propagation on Earth's day side, and because we don't have any solar storms or anything like that, even minor disturbances really, propagation on Earth's night side isn't going to be necessarily all that much better. So you're just going to have to kind of hang in there for a little while. Now on top of that, because we are at solar minimum, the cosmic ray flux is a bit more intense than it normally would be. So you frequent flyers, and this does include you air crew who fly over 800 hours annually and fly at high latitudes and high altitudes, you are in the moderate range for radiation dose, and this does include prenatal passengers. So please take this into consideration in your flight plans. So the space weather this week is definitely calming down compared to last week when we had that big G2 level solar storm. We don't have any big coronal holes that are rotating in through the Earth strike zone this week. We only have some small pockets of fast wind that could bring us a little bit of disturbed conditions, but probably nothing even to get us up to active conditions. So aurora photographers, at high latitudes you might get a chance for something, but mid-latitude aurora photographers, you're just going to have to sit this one out and maybe kind of go through your old photos from the last solar storm where we actually got some really good aurora pretty much all over the world. Now, amateur radio operators and emergency responders, you're also not liking life too much right now because we have a spotless sun and the solar flux continues to stay in the mid to high 60s. This means poor radio propagation on Earth's day side, and it looks like it's going to continue to be this way until we get some new regions rotating into Earth view from stereo on the sun's backside. Now, also you GPS users, well, you know, things are pretty quiet right now, which means that the dawn dust terminator areas that are usually kind of dicey for you, you probably get some decent reception even in those areas. And then everywhere else around the globe, your GPS reception should look pretty top-notch. I'm Tamitha Scove. Thank you for watching.